I am Brea, like he said. I am a YA fiction author. My first book is Wolves in the Woods, and it's a YA dystopian. It will be coming out May 29th, this month. So it's been a long road, and I'm super excited about that. And today I'm going to be talking about publishing, what it means to be published, and basically how to get published, and different routes of being published. Because as you can see, the definition of publish isn't what it used to be. I won't read all that, but basically what it means is anything that you print or put on electronic form on the computer is considered published. And one of the things you have to remember about that is, that I learned, is anything that you put online is considered published. So even if you put like a short story and you put that on a website, that is to a publisher, that is considered published. So if you ever write a novel, don't put it online, because sometimes the publisher will reject it just for the simple reason that it's already published online. Same thing with any kind of articles that you write, or any newsletters, all of that is considered published. So when you get to the point where you're sending in your resume, you can say, oh, I wrote this article for this journal or for this online magazine, and that's considered published. That's considered publishing credit. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But before I get so basically what this is showing you is the number of books published, and it ends at 2010, which, it's kind of an old graph really, but it's kind of self-explanatory. These lines along the bottom are books that are traditionally published, and the lines along the top are books that are self-published. So you can see this line right here, self-published, has exploded. In 2010 is when KDP came out, which is the most common self-publishing website. And after that, it was growing and will not stop, basically. It's basically the future is what they're saying, is self-published books. So this is just a different perspective. Books that were bought by U.S. consumers, and this one is up to 2012. Basically, this is saying where people go to buy their books. At the bottom here is large chains, like Barnes & Noble. And the reason there's this giant drop-off right here is this is when Borders Books went bankrupt. I don't know if you guys remember that. And then the top here is ebooks. And you can see how it's tripled just in those 3 years. And once again, it just keeps going up every year. And part of the reason for that is self-publishing. Also, I just had to point out, just because I'm always rooting for the little guy, this little blue line right here, this is independent bookstores. And they've actually grown and stayed steady in the last few years. So even if Barnes & Noble goes extinct, there still is independent bookstores, which that actually makes me feel better, because I like actual paper books. So routes of publication. First of all, there's self-publishing, like I mentioned. Then there's independent publishers, which is actually the route that I went, and it's kind of an in-between step for self-publishing and traditional publishing. So what does that mean? I'm going to start talking about self-publishing. These are the top, most common self-publishing companies out there. And basically what self-publishing means is that you are completely in charge yourself. You give them a book, and they are a distributor. They print it out, and you can either put it online completely and have an ebook, or you can actually get a paper copy. It started actually as self-publishing started as what they call vanity publishing, and I will warn you guys that if you go out into the world and try to publish a book, you will run into these companies. These are the Ex Libris, I can't remember what they're all called, but what they do is they ask for money up front. Usually it's hundreds. Sometimes it starts off at a lower number, like $100 to $200, but the problem is, if you actually read the contract, they say things like, oh, we'll charge you $100 for the ISBN number, which is the barcode at the back of the book. And bookstores and libraries will not take a book unless it has an ISBN number. And then they'll charge you for stuff like your own cover, and then they'll charge you stuff for editing. I mean, it just adds up, and it usually will end up being thousands. That's what vanity publishing is. And I'm not saying it's not a viable option, but it's not something that I would recommend personally, because I will show you there's free ways to publish. You don't need to do vanity publishing anymore. Next is e-publishing. And e-publishing is actually an option where literally you can put your book online and a week later be published. And it's free. I can go back a couple of slides here. The KDP which is Amazon, is the most common one. And literally you can get your book e-published for free. They don't charge you anything. If you want a paper copy, they charge you for something. And of course there's extras that you have to pay for if you want to, but what I'm saying is if you ever did choose to self-publish, e-publishing and any kind of publishing that you don't have to pay for it, that's the route I would go. And print on demand, or POD, is kind of similar to e-publishing, only the reason it's called self-publishing is because they can publish books really cheap. They only publish your book when someone orders it. So say you have a book that you just want to give to grandma and your dad and just your family, and you don't really want it to be worldwide, you can do print on demand publishing where they'll just print the copies that you want. And if someone orders it, then they'll send it. And sometimes there's hybrids which will combine print on demand and e-publishing. And actually most independent publishers like I have, they utilize print on demand because it's cheaper. It makes sense, they don't have to print off thousands of books and throw them in the garbage, so it makes sense. And this website, you can write it down if you want, but this is a list of self-publishing companies, and there's just too many for me to list, because there's hundreds of them and more every day, because you can see how popular self-publishing is. So this is just a little factoid for you. 25% of the top 100 books on Amazon last year were self-published. Isn't that kind of amazing? That means that 25% of the most popular books on Amazon were self-published. That's kind of amazing. That kind of says to me that self-publishing is something to be taken more seriously, that people are finally noticing that, hey, you can self-publish a book that's really good and really like it. So don't brush off self-publishing. This one is traditional publishing. These are the top 5 companies, which they call the big 5. It used to be the top 6, but Penguin and Random House merged a couple years ago. So traditional publishing is Hunger Games, all the big box store movies, books that become movies are traditionally published. The difference between normal publishing and traditional publishing, which I will get into a little bit, is that you cannot get into a traditional publisher unless you have an agent. They don't talk to authors. They don't even talk to editors. They talk to agents. They won't work with anybody but an agent. So you can see why that number at the bottom of that one graph is so tiny, because it's such a tiny market to get into. And I'll show you how long it takes to get into that. And lastly, I'm going to talk about independent publishers, and that's the route I went. I started about 3 years ago when I wrote this book, and I decided I wanted to publish it. So I did my research and started looking, and I kind of fell into that self-publishing trap at first, vanity publishers, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that, that's awful. And so I went to the annual Writers Conference in Madison. Have you guys heard of that one? It's at the UW. It's an awesome conference. If you're interested in writing at all or publishing, I highly recommend it. But I learned that there's kind of an in-between publishers. They don't work for the big 5, so to speak. They are privately owned, which means they make the rules, basically. So I sent my letter into an independent publisher based out of Texas called Black Rose Writing. And they are much more flexible. They let you work with your cover, whereas a traditional publisher, they don't give you choices. You get what you get, and too bad. They pick a cover for you. They make the edits. They cut things. They won't even tell you that they do it. I mean, you just hand them your baby, and it's theirs. They'll do with what they want. Whereas independent publishers, they're smaller. They only publish at the most 100 books a year. So they're willing to work with you. They'll work with your cover. I'm supposed to get my cover in 2 weeks. But they took suggestions from me, like what I wanted, what I was looking for, and they'll work with you. So that's kind of in between. And the reason I didn't list independent publishers is because there's hundreds of them, and there's more every day, and there's more that go out of business every day because it's a competitive business. But this book called the Writer's Market, a fabulous book if you're looking for a publisher of any kind, traditional or an agent. It lists them by genre, so what kind of book you're writing, and then you can look it up and find 100 of them. So I highly recommend this book if you're looking for it. And they come out with a new one every year. So, all right, the process. So step number 1, who do you query? And a query is just a fancy word of like sending in your resume. So who do you send it to start with? You'll send it to one of three people. Your book, you turn your book into a one-page letter, which I'll talk about a little bit, and you send it into one of these three people, either an agent, an editor, or a publisher. Like I said, if you want to traditionally publish, you have to send it to an agent. There's no question about it. An editor, sometimes, the whole editor world is kind of iffy. Sometimes you can find an editor that works for an agent or an editor that works for a publisher, and they will love your book and they will fall in love with it, and they'll take it to that person, to that publisher, and say, hey, I found this great book, will you look at it for me? But usually I don't recommend going that route because it's a long road, because then you have to obtain an editor, and then you have to obtain an agent or a publisher, so it's kind of adding an extra step. Or you can directly query the publisher like I did, which would be independent publishing. So, and like I mentioned, agents, they have this quote called no unsolicited submissions, and that just means that they won't talk to anyone except for an agent. So if you run into that in your process. So step number 2, what to write. A lot of people think that when you write a book and you're going to get published, you're done. That's all you write. The end. But that's actually not true. You have to write a lot, and it's really difficult. It's actually a lot harder to summarize everything that you write into all these little letters that you have to write than writing the actual book itself. I started with a cover letter, but most of the time they don't require a cover letter unless you are sending in a formal paper, like in the mail. Usually what you're going to send in is a query letter, and I mentioned that earlier, but it's what it is a one-page summary of your book, of yourself, like what you are, what you've accomplished, who you are, what degrees you have, that kind of thing, and your marketing plan. So, hey, how am I going to make you money? Now, if you can imagine taking, I'm trying to think how many pages, 206-page book, and turning that into a paragraph. That's a query letter. So you see what I mean by saying that was really hard for me. Well, and actually in classes that I've taken, they make you turn it into a sentence, which is called a log line, taking a whole book and turning it into a sentence. Talk about a challenge. And then another thing that you'll have to write is a synopsis, and a synopsis is a whole page about your book. And for me, that was harder than the paragraph. The paragraph I can cut out, and I can give you the general idea of what it's about, but the whole page was like taking your story and putting it into a page, so that was hard for me. And then your biography, which I mentioned, is about you. And your biography, a lot of people don't realize, is you're selling yourself, because a lot of publishing is hey, I can do this, I can make you money, and you're gonna love my book, and I'm qualified to write this. There's a lot of that too. So the biography, just remember when you write it, sell yourself too. And the biography is written in third person, so you're like talking about yourself like you're not there, which is weird. And then for nonfiction books, it's kind of a whole different ballgame. For nonfiction books, you don't technically have to have a book when you get it published. Sometimes they just want your idea of a book, and that's what a proposal is. A proposal is a huge packet of different kinds of information. It's similar to everything that I said, but it's kind of all in one. And you don't even have to have the whole book. You just have to say, this is my idea for a nonfiction book, and sometimes they'll accept that. So agents will not, however. You have to have the book finished. Submission guidelines. Okay, the reason I put this in here is very important. No matter who you contact, whether it be an agent, an editor, or a publisher, every single one of them have different rules on what they want from you. They have different rules of how to format your query letter. They have different rules of how they want it, whether it be an email or paper or, they're all very, very picky. So you're going to be rewriting this thing over and over and over and over again. And I will tell you that I submitted my own book to 50 agents and publishers before I was done. So I rewrote this whole thing 50 times, basically. So you have to have tough skin and determination. And I just mentioned this one again, the writer's market, because again, they have tips and stuff like this in there. They have sample query letters and they have sample synopsises. It's just an awesome book, so I highly recommend it. The way it works. So the first thing that you'll do is, like I said, you'll send out a query letter. usually to an agent if you're going to go that route, or to a publisher if you're going to go that route. Sometimes they'll ask for more after that. Sometimes they'll ask for, right away, they'll ask for a query letter, a synopsis, and sample chapters at the same time. But every single one of them is different, which is why I emphasize the submission guidelines. Sometimes they'll ask for a query letter and the first 10 pages. Sometimes they'll ask for a query letter and a synopsis. Sometimes they'll ask for a query letter all by itself, and they don't want to see anything else until they write a query letter. And I should have said that when I was talking about my query letter, is you can imagine how frustrating that is when you take all this time and you research these people and you send them a query letter and they read the first line. This is what a publisher and agent does. They read the first line about your book. Oh, I like that. So then they'll keep reading and read the rest of the paragraph about your book. And they'll be like, oh, okay, that sounds okay, you know, and then they'll read the next one down, and they literally, if at any point they don't like what they read, they throw it away. So it's a tough process. So then after that first step, they'll ask you for something else, you know, whatever they didn't ask for the first time. Either more chapters or more pages or your synopsis. Sometimes at that point they'll ask for the whole book, but not usually. And then sometimes they'll ask for more again. Sometimes it can be a 4-step process, or sometimes they'll ask for the whole manuscript finally. And when you get to that point, it's like, yes! And then what they'll do is publishers have a team that they work with. It's not just them. They work with an editor. They work with all sorts of different people that work there. And every single one of them will have a project that they'll bring to this meeting they have. It's usually about once a month. And they'll say, hey, I have this book. I really like it. I like the girl that's wrote it. She's very passionate. You know, I like what she's trying to do, blah, 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 blah. Or they'll say, whatever, check out this one. And then they'll vote. They'll have a vote and decide, okay, do I like this one, or will this fit with our team? And I've gotten to that point 3 times with 3 different publishers. And twice it was because they already had something too similar. That's what they told me. So they rejected it at that point. You can imagine how painful that was to go through all that and then nope, sorry, try again. But then finally, they'll get your acceptance letter. Ooh. So how long does all of that take? Longer than you think. The query letter you're first sent in takes anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. I've had one take as long as 6 months. I thought it was a no, and sometimes they won't answer you at all. They'll have it in their policy that if they're not interested, they just won't answer you. Once again, read the guidelines, because I've been waiting one time and it said clearly that they wouldn't answer me. Next, when they ask for your next step, whatever that may be, it takes 3 to 6 months. So, and then the next step after that, when they finally ask for your whole manuscript, it's another 3 to 6 months, which is a very long and painful 3 to 6 months. And obviously, because this process takes so long, you don't just send out one and wait for 6 months. You send out a mass of them, you know, as many as you can, as many as you have time. I sent out a dozen of them at one point, you know, just because it takes so long. So query to acceptance, from the time you first contact a publisher or an agent to that acceptance letter, can take from 6 months to a year. Isn't that crazy? And acceptance to publication is a whole different story. So from the time you get to that acceptance letter till I'm holding this book in my hand is 6 months to a year again. So total, it can take 1 to 2 years from the time that you send a message to a publisher or an agent to the time that you're actually holding that book in your hand. So it's a really long process. For me, it actually, this particular publisher only took about 9 months, which was pretty fast. I was impressed. So, this is talking about self-publishing, but I wanted to mention quick that I didn't say anything about agents, because even though that process took 1 to 2 years, it would be twice as long with an agent, because you have to go through all of that to contact an agent and have them accept you, and then they will take it to a publisher who will accept you, and that usually takes about 6 months for an agent to find a place for your book. So that adds on another year, basically. So traditional publishing takes about 2 to 3 years from the time that you send a message to an agent to the time you're holding your book in your hand. Can you imagine waiting 3 years to see your book? Oh, it drives me crazy. And then self-publishing is a totally different ballgame. And this is the reason, this right here is the reason why self-publishing is so huge right now, is because it takes about a week, or at the very most, 6 months for paper books. So let me see, 3 years or a week. It's kind of no contest. But not all of them are high quality, and not all of them are easy, because some of them, there's a lot of formatting you have to do, which is all about the margins and the fitting it into the lines, and some of them are very complicated and are way above my head. And rejection. You will be rejected. I promise that you will be rejected. It's rejected 30 times. Chicken Soup for the Soul was rejected 140 times. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the poor publisher that rejected that? Because now he's a billionaire, by the way. Gone with the Wind was rejected by 38 publishers. That's something? Gone with the Wind. So, rejection is normal. Just take it as stride, learn from it, and move on. So to sum it up, self-publishing is bigger than ever before. It is something that has come in the last decade, and it's not going to go away. It's only going to get more popular, and it's only going to continue to explode. Ebooks are growing in popularity every year too, and this is such a touchy subject. One of the things that they did not talk about at the conference that I went to all weekend was, are paper books going to disappear? Because it's such a sensitive subject that nobody wanted to talk about it. I am on the mindset that they're never going to disappear, because that first slide I showed, that independent publishers that are still doing okay, I don't think they're ever going to go away. But that's my opinion, because I like paper books. But the definition of author has been changed forever. That's kind of a big one for me. When I first started, I started with this silly mindset. I had never heard of self-publishing, and I had this silly mindset, author is a huge thing, like this is a hard thing to do, and it's a huge accomplishment, but really, I've met hundreds of people that just clicked the button. Just, they had to write the book, of course, but to actually get it published, they just put it online. Ta-da, I'm published. So when you hear someone say I'm published or I'm an author, it means something totally different than what it used to. Not necessarily a bad thing, just very different. But the pro of that, the good thing, is that everyone has more options before to publish now than they ever had before. And sometimes, I love that, because sometimes there's books that don't fit in a certain category. They're young adult, but they have like different aspects of all different genres, and publishers don't like that. They don't like when you mix it up. And now they have an opportunity to publish because they're self-publishing. So I like it. I like the fact that we have so many. Just threw this slide in because I could literally do a whole nother talk on marketing. But like I said, quality, quantity, and you. Those are the three most important things to remember. Do we have any questions?
What is Wolves in the Woods about?
Wolves in the Woods is a YA dystopian. And like I said, the main character is Braylon, and she faces the end of the world, so to speak, a virus called C47, and she loses her family and her twin, and she has to learn how to survive. She gets chased into the big woods of Wisconsin. It's based in Wisconsin, and she has to learn how to survive in every definition of the word. She has to learn how to feed herself, and she has to learn how to protect herself, things that you take for granted, things you don't think about. And then just to throw some romance in there, she meets two brothers in the book, and she faces the challenges that come with being in the middle of a relationship too. So, yeah, I brought on my book trailer, and I'll show it to you guys. Okay. But yeah, does anybody have any other questions, or?
Do all self-publishing, if you go the vanity route, they all cost something? Or just the rip-off ones?
Ebooks, not necessarily. You can actually publish online with ebooks for free. But if you want an actual paper copy, yes, they all cost
Okay,
something.
and then the writer's market, I have that, but it's the old one. Do they have independent publishers in there?
Yes, they do. That's where I found mine.
Okay.
Yep. They have hundreds of them in there. It's
Yeah.
an awesome book.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that book. So,
So it's the book.
yeah.
So the ebook, who does the formatting of the book?
You do, for the most part. Ebooks, sometimes what they'll do is they'll give you like a template, and you have to fit your book into this. It's like taking a round peg and fitting into a square hole, basically. They have so much information out there about it, like tutorials, and they have YouTube videos and all sorts of information to help you do it, but essentially you put it in there. So, and I have not faced that challenge. I've considered self-publishing one of my books, but I'm not sure if I want to. That scares me. I let somebody else take care of it, so.
Yeah, it's pretty, like I had an experience publishing a novel myself, and I was happy just to have the manuscript done, turned it over to a designer who, you know, he had to do all the formatting
Yep.
so that it would be accepted by creators.
Right, and you can hire people to do it, or if you have good friends that
Yeah.
that are technology savvy, they'll do it for you, sure.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people do that. Yep. But it, you know, it is doable. I make it sound super difficult, but you know, obviously with e-publishing as popular as it is, people do it, you know, so it's possible. It's challenging, but it's possible, so.
What kind of writing schedule do you have?
I am actually, I'm a mom, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I kind of write whenever I can. My kids, I've written since they were babies, so my kids are kind of trained when they see mom on the laptop, leave her alone. Don't bother mom, because she'll yell at you. So I try to not to immerse myself for too long, you know, so I don't abandon them, but I kind of, whenever I can, you know, and usually in the evenings a lot, when they've all gone to bed, you know, and the house is quiet, or really early in the morning, I'll get up early and do my writing, so.
So you go through the whole process of drafting, and then going back to revise, or how do you work?
That's what I do, yes. Not all writers do. I have a good friend who, he edits every single line that he writes as he's writing it. He'll write a line, he'll edit it, he'll write another line and edit it, and I'm still not like that at all. I write chapters, and then I go back and look at it again and reread it and edit it, because I don't like interrupting the process, you know, the flow. But that's just me. Every person is different, so.
You write like that, don't you, Jimmy?
You both. Yeah, do you edit as you go?
Yeah, mostly that.
It depends on what I'm writing, I guess. If I'm writing like something serious, or like I've written a lot of brief articles for online magazines. But if I'm writing something like that, then I'm super paranoid about how I edit it, and I'll edit it as I go. But when it's something fun, like my young adult novels, I fly through. I can edit later.
Sounds like a good book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions, or otherwise I can show you my book trailer, which I'm super excited about. I actually made this myself. This is all my information. I'll come back to that. But you can hire someone to make a book trailer. You don't have to have a book trailer. I just did it because it was fun. I did it on Windows Live. I don't know if there's sound on this.
You may have turned that knob up. There you go.